people are doing. So now obviously we're starting off with the selfie cameras, but to just briefly talk about these two phones, it's very obvious that the X100 Pro, it's meant to be a photography device. That's what it's built for. But somehow I kind of have high hopes about the video department, so to speak. I haven't seen anything yet. I'm just recording these things, but yeah, I don't know. I just feel like it's about time that Vivo improved their videography to at least be on par with other devices like the S24 Ultra and stuff like that. I don't expect it to be as good as the iPhone. Nothing is as good as the iPhone. Nothing will be as good as the bloody iPhone. That's just a fact. And well, the selfie video still sucks. It's a 1080p, and yeah, it still bloody baffles me that there's just two goddamn smartphones, two companies that are making smartphones that can provide 4K selfie video. I mean, why? Why is it so difficult? I don't think so. But yeah, that's just the reality of the fact, and it sucks balls. But regardless, let's jump into, I think, portrait video next. Alright, so portrait selfie video. Now look, the whole portrait video thing, the whole cinematic mode thing, all these smartphones, it's I think if you've seen any of my video comparisons previously, which I haven't done a lot of those recently, but regardless, if you've seen any of them, you know for a fact that I'm not a huge believer yet. I think that the imperfections are very obvious, and when they happen, that's when stuff hits the fan. Because if you think about it, whenever an imperfection happens in a portrait photograph, it's fairly obvious, and it pretty much ruins it. But in a video, a singular frame out of the 24 or 30 frames that is being captured every single goddamn second, if a singular frame is bad, the entire video is gonna suck. And so yeah, I'm just gonna err on the side of caution and not use portrait video, because I don't want my entire video to not look good at the end of the day, to look imperfect. That just feels pointless to me. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's just my opinion, but hey, all I have is my opinion after all. Alright, selfie video, I don't think I have much to say here, except for the fact that there are two very uncanny things going on here. So first and foremost, you heard the audio too, right? Doesn't the X100 sound basically the exact same as the iPhone 15 Pro Max? It's a bloody compliment for the X100, by the way. But it's so similar, it is uncanny. Like, how is it so similar? Like, there's always some amount of difference. But yeah, I don't think there is much of anything in this case. It's quite something. But the second thing, which was even more weird, is that the iPhone's video, despite the fact that it is 4K as opposed to 1080p on the X100, the iPhone's video doesn't look that nice in some cases. Like, the lighting wasn't exactly easy. Just to be clear, we had warm light on one side and white light on the other. There was plenty of light, but not exactly easy lighting, so to speak. However, the X100 in general is managing contrast just a little bit better. I think that's why it looks a little bit more punchy, a little bit less flat in certain situations, in certain lightings. And that's maybe why it looks a little bit nicer. The iPhone is still more detailed, just to be clear. Now for regular 4K 30 with the rear cameras, oh yes, see, I kind of had a hunch that maybe with all these upgrades we got with photography, maybe, just maybe, Vivo just, dipped their toes into the videography game as well. Turns out they did. So, as you can see, I mean, again, isn't it a little uncanny just how similar these two look, with just a minor difference in contrast and saturation, both of which are a little bit higher on the X100, just a pinch though, not exactly a massive difference. Also notice just how well the exposure is compensated for on both, especially in like the backlit shot, and then when I turn back around, both phones are able to handle very challenging lighting situations with the sun and whatnot very easily, and I think that's exceptional. Now I do want to point out one advantage that the iPhone still has. It's with the stabilization. It's just a pinch better. You can see a few more jerks making it into the X100, while that's not really happening on the iPhone. Now for the ultrawide camera, so I think actually in certain cases, in some of the shots at least, the exposure was a little bit better on the X100. It was low enough to really bring out the depth in the colors and whatnot. Maybe it's a personal preference for me, I guess, but yeah, it's like The ultrawide again looks really good. I do think the iPhone may have a pinch more sharpness, but of course we have a details test coming soon that will confirm that, if at all. Now for focusing, see this is it's weird. So I decided to try and do the test on these flowers. You know, it's red against a green backdrop basically. So I thought it would be very easy for these phones to focus on. Turns out not the case for the X100, because it kept trying to focus on the leaves just below the flowers, which, you know, are basically the same color, at least closer to the same color as the background, which makes no sense to me, but that's just the way it is. And yeah, there was a lot of wind, there's a lot of movement going on. Of course there's going to be inconsistencies, that goes without saying, but I'm just surprised because the iPhone as well, it could not focus on the flowers. Maybe the flowers are defective. Glitch in the matrix maybe? Who knows? But anyways, I do think that for the most part the iPhone was able to maintain focus just a pinch better as opposed to the X100 on the leaves below the flowers, because for some reason that's the subject. Because also the iPhone is overcompensating for the warm sunlight a little bit more than I would personally like. Now for zoom, so simple enough. We have the ultrawide camera, we got the main camera, and of course a 2x, which doesn't really work all that well, at least on the X100 Pro. But of course you don't really want to use 2x because sensor crop doesn't really work with video. You want to go for the 4.3x, which is exceptional. I mean, immediately the difference between 2x and 4.3x is massive, and it appears to be kind of stable on the X100. Now with the iPhone it's a similar situation. Ultra wide, main camera, we of course have the 2x, and the 2x does look significantly better than the X100s. I don't really know the exact reasoning behind it, but it looks better, it looks less processed, it looks less over sharpened and more detailed, so it's just better overall. You can of course go to the 5x, which again, as opposed to the 2x, even on the iPhone it looks better, and it's optical, that's why it looks better, simple as that. And now for 4K 60, it's exactly the same as what we saw with 4K 30, which is to say extremely similar video quality on both, extremely similar white balance. I mean, the white balance is basically perfect on both in this case. It's very good and very consistent, especially on the X100. I expect the iPhone to be incredible, I expect it to be very consistent, but I did not expect that, at least not to this extent on the X100. I thought, you know, maybe they've improved, but yeah, this is a leap forward and I'm all about that. I do once again want to point out slightly worse stabilization. I mean, it's not a massive difference at this point. It almost feels like a nitpick in certain cases, but I have to point it out. It's a comparison after all. The iPhone stabilization overall with the main camera is just better. Now with the ultrawide, of course, you get focus 60 on both of them. You get focus 60 on every single camera on the rear, and that's just a very good thing. And again, it looks just phenomenal on both. And I even like the colors a little bit more on the X100. I think it's not as overexposed, or rather as flat as the iPhone. So I do prefer that. And you know, it works really well and very consistently on both phones, and that is something I appreciate a lot. You can of course zoom in immediately while you're recording from the ultrawide straight to the 2x, I think that's what I'm using maybe, and then you can go straight to the 4.3x or 5x on the iPhone, and that also looks phenomenal. It's a little flat on both in most cases. I guess that has something to do with the fact that the sun is right up front, and you know, the exposure can be a little bit problematic there. Now for super stable, I'll tell you this much: the X100 is good for what it has, but the iPhone is miles ahead for two simple reasons. Despite being high quality, the iPhone gives you slightly better stabilization. Now, in general, the iPhone will give you slightly better stabilization, so I'm not surprised that it does it here as well. But the quality, again, the 2.8K resolution that you get, and the fact that the iPhone's quality in general is just phenomenal, to say the very least, you can get some beautiful shots with extreme levels of stabilization. I mean, I'm not exactly making it easy for these phones, but they can produce very good stabilization, but the quality wins it for the iPhone here. And not to mention the versatility with the iPhone. You can use the ultrawide as well. For some reason you can't do that on the X100. I mean, it would depreciate the quality even further, which, you know, I would just recommend that you don't use the ultrawide even if we could. But on the iPhone, because again you have a very high quality 2.8K resolution, you can have very good ultra wide super stable video or action mode video, and it works really well. But then of course the iPhone never gives you 8K. Now just forget about everything else and look at the stabilization on the X100 Pro. This is beautiful, properly stabilized 8K video that we're getting. I don't believe the X90 Pro had that. The stabilization was horrible on the X90 Pro, as far as I can remember. And that's just not the case here anymore. The X100 can produce just as good 8K video if you were to just walk around with it as 4K on the iPhone. Not as good stabilization as the iPhone in general, but hey, you're getting 8K. And you can use it anytime you want, anywhere you want, and it just works as long as you have good light. You can also zoom in to 2x with 8K, which makes no sense because you're just cropping in and you're not using the full sensor. Why would you do that? You're gonna lose out on details. That makes no sense. Now then, the one bloody reason that the iPhone just wins this comparison for me is this right here. You know exactly what I'm talking about. The log video profile. Bloody hell. You can push it so far and it just does not break. And now I'll point out one little mistake I made. I did not lock the exposure here. I thought I did, but apparently it didn't really work out. But anyways, that's why certain scenes might look a little too dark, because I graded based on the parts where the exposure was a little bit higher and then realized how the exposure is shifting around, and you know, that's why you should lock the exposure every time you're shooting in log, because you're gonna grade it, color grade it that is, pretty far, and it can take it, man. It looks phenomenal here. Even for a very, very simple shot such as this right here, it's not even a problem on the iPhone. I do want to reiterate, I'm pushing things very far here with the color separation, but I see zero artifacting and zero color banding. That is beyond impressive for me, and for someone who actually likes to color grade, this is perfect. I don't really need anything else. Now, of course, I completely understand this only applies to those who actually care about color grading, about spending time with the video they take, and not for any normal person who just wants to occasionally take a video. At that point, what you do care about is a regular video that comes out, and that's good on both, as I mentioned. But how are the details with 4K 30? So when we crop into 500% on this video, you can see that the X100 actually has more detail. Sure, it does have more detail, it does have more texture popping out, but a lot of that is because the software is sharpening things up. And that's a problem, because I don't like the way it looks, even though it has more detail. Now, of course, 500% crop, it doesn't look all that good. Maybe at 1x, it's not all that bad. But still, why bother? It has good detail. Even without sharpening, I could bet you money that the iPhone would not be able to produce as much detail as the X100, but because it's sharpening things so much, it just doesn't look all that appealing anymore. Now with 8K, it's a similar situation, but because of just how much more detail 8K in general produces, not to mention the fact that it has an incredible stabilization on the X100 for 8K that is, I think it looks good. But again, why bother sharpening it? It just makes no sense. All it is doing is adding some haloing around some of the textures and the edges, and maybe exemplifying the grain a little bit more. It's not really doing anything. If anything at all, it's actually making the image slightly worse. And you'll see it's a very similar situation with 2x as well. It's part of the reason why I felt the iPhone's 2x, even though it wasn't quite as high quality as the rest of the optical zooms that we had, it still looks significantly better than the X100, because on top of the 2x, the processing just makes it look not quite as nice. I do realize that the X100's processing, the sharpening that is, it does the same thing with images as well. But with images, the quality is so good and the software I feel is a little bit more optimized. So it kind of passes the mark in most images. There are some that might look horrible, of course, there's always going to be the exception, but in most cases the images look fine. But the video department, it definitely needs to water down these sharpening things. Now for some reason, I don't know why, I took this same shot with slightly changed angles and slightly different distances with the iPhone. There was plenty of light, just so you know, because both phones are using the optical zoom. I even checked that. But for some reason, the detail level on the iPhone with the 5x is horrible. I don't even need to zoom in this case. You can tell that the iPhone just does not have as much detail as the X100. I mean, it will zoom in, of course, this 500% crop, and you can tell. It doesn't even look like it's focusing. It did focus, just so you know. I checked again and again. I took multiple shots. But this is a result I just constantly got. I'm unable to speak because this is surprising me so damn much. Now then, for the ultrawide camera, now just so you know, this situation, the lighting situation, is not exactly easy. It's not perfect daylight, it's not plenty of or a plethora of lighting that we have here for either of these phones, but it does point out a very significant advantage the iPhone has. And no, I'm not talking about the wider field of view. The iPhone does have a wider field of view, which is why the framing is a little off. But still, you can see the slightly less exaggerated processing that happens on the iPhone. It really works here. The sheer amount, the magnitude of grain on the X100, it's insanity. And it's not even grain, it's the artifacting that is happening because of the noise reduction on the grain on the X100. And it doesn't work for me. In this case, it's way too much. Now again, at 1x it wasn't all that bad, but I could still see it. The iPhone, you couldn't even see any of the artifacting or any bits of grain when we were at 1x, which was very impressive for me. Now talking about impressive, night video on the X100. We don't get any particular mode like a night video mode on the X100, which was a little odd, but apparently it doesn't even bloody need it because it's better than the iPhone. It's better than the goddamn iPhone at night, at low light. Let that sink in. The stabilization, that's all I need to say. You can see it for yourself. This is insane. It's not supposed to be this good on the X100 Pro. And it's not supposed to be this bad on the iPhone either. I feel like the iPhone 14 Pro Max or the 14 Pros, they had better stabilization at night. But regardless, it's better than the latest and greatest iPhone at night video. That's insane. And yeah, you can use other lenses as well, but I would recommend not doing so because it's low light. It's pointless to use any other lens. You're just gonna get significantly inferior results. And I do want to point out, the iPhone does have slightly less noise in the sky, just a pinch less, now than slow motion. And no, neither of these phones have the good slow-mo that the S24 Ultra finally does. I'm talking about 4K 120. Do you know the previous phones that had 4K 120? The OnePlus 8 Pro. I also think the OnePlus 9 Pro had it, but I'm not entirely sure. Whatever the case, those phones came out years ago. I'm talking like 2020, 2021. That's how long ago 4K 120 was technically feasible, possible for slow motion. And now is the time that Samsung finally decided to give us. Also, now is the time that neither of these phones are giving it to us. So yeah, I don't really know what else to say. I mean, 1080p 240, sure, it looks good. Of course it looks good. It's been here since before I was born. Or maybe not, but regardless. It's the same as you would expect. Both look very nice, but it's not 4K 120. Anyways, that is a wrap for this comparison. Oh man, look, for me personally, as someone who is interested in taking video and color grading video, the iPhone wins. You know, it has log mode, and anytime that I take video for my own personal use, or if I want to edit it, I'm going to take it in log. Simple as that. But for anyone who is not interested in log mode, which I would probably say is majority of the people, holy mother of God, the X100 can keep up. Just damn. Yeah, it doesn't have as good stabilization with 4K 30, but otherwise it's doing a very good job. Yes, the focusing was weird on both. I don't know why that happened, and still it wasn't quite as good, quite as consistent as the iPhone, but again, small difference. It's a very impressive upgrade that I didn't even think was gonna happen on the X100. I didn't expect it in the slightest. Bloody hell. Well, anyways, I'll see you guys soon enough, probably with the review for the X100 Pro because it's bloody time. And well, cheers.